First of all, I want to lay out what I think are some of the key ideas that we've heard about already with the previous two speakers, but key ideas in our own strategic planning process that have been really important to us. One is vulnerability, this notion of being open to growing. Dennis, you know, your friend and mine, Quentin Shepard in Texas, talks a lot about this notion of being open and growing as opposed to closed when we're knowing, right? So being open to the perspectives of others, and responsive. And I think that shows care and love to our community as well. This idea of continuity and consistency, focusing our organization, being much better stewards of resources and the capacity we have, but keeping people out of the mud, so to speak, I like to say, which is when we're focused on particular goals for the district, we can avoid some of the distractions of the current kind of political debate or the rancor in our communities and say, no, this is the work that we're focused on right now. I think collaboration is so key to this, bringing in more people who have greater investment. Before, the notion of ambassadors was mentioned, right, who are going to go out and sell this work in our community, but creating a lot of commitment then to the work together in a school community. We're united and connected in both our purpose and then in our plan. The meaningfulness of any plan, I think, is important to consider as well. So it's not just our plan as leaders. I think Aldo pointed out he inherited a more top-down situation. I think that those are often so unproductive, but rather a plan that is everybody's plan, right? Not just our plan, but our plan as a school community. If it means something to you as a school community member, you're likely to engage more deeply in it. And I think the idea of a strategic plan that is iterative, that is flexible, you know, I use this example often with people. Would you have guessed just a couple of years ago that we'd be in the situation we are in, emerging from a pandemic? So 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, I don't know that we would have ever predicted the situation we're in. So getting locked into, we will do this in the year 2027, I think is sometimes a mistake. Having a plan that is more flexible is key. The history for us, or how we got here, you mentioned starting here in 2009, Dennis. I walked into an organization exceptionally innovative, thoughtful, creative, successful across the board, thought to be successful across the board, successful with some children, but not maybe all children. And those some children were highly successful, but our questions revolved around how could we have this experience for everybody? By 2016, after trying a lot of different ways to focus the organization, we landed on this type of process that I'm going to explain to you today, this blueprint planning process. And we knew that we had to be more focused, more strategic, more intentional in the work and hold people accountable to that. We held our first collaborative meeting, which was bringing 50, 60 stakeholders together from throughout the organization and the community for a day-long opportunity to really go through with an extensive, here's what we're doing right now. But to be honest, we had very little dialogue. We had an opportunity for people to contribute, but we weren't really engaging the full community at that point. We really were just bringing people together to help us plan, but help us plan based on work that we thought had to happen. We also, at that time, used a survey instrument. And honestly, we only had answers at that point to the questions that we thought to ask, as opposed to the broad approach to thought exchange, which allows people to provide their feedback, their ideas on the questions that they have, as opposed to us limiting people in what they share based on only the questions that we think to ask. And we only prioritized what we thought was important because, again, the data was based on our questions and our assumptions, not on feedback really directly from the community. So the game changer came in. And now let's think, everybody, historically for 1 second, 2016, fall of 2016, important historical moment in our country. Whether you loved it, hated it, wherever you're on the political spectrum, that's not what I'm getting at or criticizing, but it was a dramatic shift in our nation relative to an apparent divisiveness and things that we were struggling with, right, after the election that happened in 2016. So the game changer for us, and yes, to my Thought Exchange friends, I used the old school logo and branding, and I'm sorry, but it was that time. It was old school. And we said, we need to do something different and engage in a different kind of conversation. There was so much rancor and division and frustration that we had to find a way to go out and ask people how they felt and not just be responsive to the limited feedback from surveys or from Facebook groups, et cetera. We needed to engage more deeply. So we developed a process around that, and that's where we've landed now. The first step in our process is to gather feedback using an exchange, and I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. It brings so many more people into the conversation. I think Rui mentioned, Aldo did as well, the incredible complex nature of communities and how overwhelming it could be to actually try and bring thousands of people in the door to have a conversation. How do you capture that data? How do you engage everybody? Well, an exchange allows you to do that very, very quickly. By the way, it also allows you to exchange members of your community that don't always jump in and don't always come to meetings or don't feel comfortable coming to meetings. They haven't been welcomed through the door. Their experiences haven't been such that they are included or that we're responsive enough to them. So we do quite a bit to try and reach out to all members of our community and making exchanges available and accessible. Gather that feedback. And then we have 3 basically sessions, so 2, 3, and 4 here on your screen. And the first is to work with our board and our leadership team on mission, vision, core values. We review the overall data that we get from the community, that big, broad exchange. And then we have a session where we simply talk about what is our core fundamental purpose? What does it look like when we're accomplishing that mission? And what are our core values as an organization? We use exchanges actually in that event itself as well. In all of these opportunities for us to be together, we use exchanges to make space for the quiet people in the room, to engage everybody in the discussion, to capture their feedback. We talked a little bit about, and I love Kaylin's graphic at the beginning about sucking the joy out or stealing the joy, a thief of joy, I think it was Steve Carell's office perspective. We've all been in those moments with chart paper and dots and the former English teacher or the current English teacher who's going to wordsmith it to death, and we're going to be tortured over the comma and the conjunction. Using thought exchange, gathering a lot of feedback, and then allowing people to engage in dialogue over that feedback that's live in the room is a much better way, I think, than the chart paper and the requirement for somebody to put their hand up in the air. So we do a lot of that. We walk away from that day with some drafts of that information. We go to the second day with a large stakeholder group, 40, 50, 60 people, depending on in our community, but other communities that we've done this work in as well. And shared those draft mission, vision, core value statements, and then asked people in that room for feedback using exchange, again, allowing everybody to participate and contribute. We do a lot of presentation and level setting with, yes, I've stolen it, 5-minute of fame presentations for people to be able to, within the organization, talk about what they're doing. And then again, engage people in a conversation using panel discussions and exchanges to foster more dialogue and make space for everybody in that room. We review the data as well, and by that time we've developed a series of priority areas from the thought exchange feedback that our plan will focus on. We spend the rest of the day saying, then what should we do about it? Here are the priority areas that came from the data. This is what it said. We spend some time on those differences slides that are prepared by thought exchange, so very helpful. And then we engage people in that question, okay, what is our objective in that area and what are our action steps? What are we actually going to do about it? And finally, we come back for a third time to have a conversation with a leadership team, boiling down the ideas from the day before to say, okay, we're going to honor 99% of that. If it requires us to put a child on the moon by 2030, that's not going to happen. So we have to be honest about that and figure out how we can actually make these things happen, who's going to do the work, when they're going to do it, and then commit to some action plans. We put that all together. And nested within the putting it all together and the plan needs to be also opportunities for people to give feedback and continue to exchange information and engage in a dialogue. So nesting exchanges within our action plans, I think, is a really important step to continue that work. This is just an example of that question that we ask. We're planning for the future. What should we be thinking about for our short, long-term planning for the district? What are we doing well? What can we improve on? That's a regular part of our dialogue now. And that notion of openness and vulnerability has really changed the shape of the dialogue in the community. The Facebook page no longer has some of the same negativity on it because people know they're going to have an opportunity to offer their feedback and be asked, and they can offer in a way that doesn't get them attacked at the lacrosse game on Saturday morning for sharing their perspective because of the nature of an exchange, and they can see what other people are thinking too. This is an example of those priority areas that come from our exchange, came from our exchange last year and where we are right now. You can see each of these 5 areas, and they're scaffolded by the examples of thoughts that fell under those particular areas. Each of them results in a particular objective being written that become our district goals overall in the area. And those result in action plans, specific actions that we have committed to then to meet the objective in that area. And this particular example was mental health and wellness, and it shows you these 3 particular steps. That's only the beginning. There's many more of these. Who's going to get that done and when they're going to do it? Who's going to be engaged in that? Examples of those exchanges that we use in the room. Again, we ask people, what is your core fundamental purpose on that first night among the 3 exchanges we do? We come back and we ask people on that day, that stakeholder day, to weigh in on the mission, vision, core values, and again, make space for everybody in that conversation. And those panel conversations are a key part of that day as well. So you asked about joy, and joy, the notion of pleasure, a feeling of great pleasure and happiness in strategic planning, which to people outside of our work, they must think, boy, you people need more hobbies. We don't necessarily need more hobbies, we need more joy for sure. You can do that. So I think about it this way in terms of where's the joy in strategic planning. One, there's always more joy when there's more people at the party. So the more people we can bring into the conversation and have a part of it, the more joy we are going to create for everybody in the discussion. Openness and vulnerability, I think, creates more joy. There's more happiness, there's more feeling of care for the individual when they know we are open to their feedback and we're vulnerable and hearing about what we can do better for them. It's just a great emotional exchange that way. There's more joy when we know we're making a difference. Our community became so focused on our planning that resulted in, I am convinced, specific steps that led us to raise our graduation rate from 89% to 98%. But not just for one group of kids. We used to have gaps between subgroups of average of as much as 13%. We're down now to 2%. So in other words, our 98% graduation rate is that way for all children, not one group of children. So all underrepresented populations are achieving at a very high level. There is great joy when people see the result of their intentionality and their specific steps to get better. And that intentionality in and of itself creates joy. People feeling like they're accomplishing what they set out to do. I think connecting humans along the way, there's a lot of people involved in this process. And we spend a lot of time on them feeling really good about talking to each other and sharing their ideas, engaging them very personally in the work as well. I think joy is created when people are united in attitude and effort, when they're on the same page. I am a Buffalo Bills fan, a Buffalo native, a long-suffering Bills fan who also went through 4 Super Bowl losses. I will tell you that when that team is successful, the area is much more united and positive and feeling much more joyful in both their attitude and then their effort as well. And you know, there's this expression in weightlifting, I think, no pain, no gain. I would say less pain, more gain when it comes to strategic planning. If you make it painful and people are tortured by chart paper and tortured by that, you got to have a comma here, you're not going to gain as much. So by creating a space where people can all contribute in a way that's comfortable, they can see each other's thoughts, they're not put on the spot, I think you gain much more feedback, but much more joy as well in the process.